or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Corrine, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the April 14th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. As always, thank you for joining us today. The highlights under business and finance are: Goldman Sachs said its profit jumped 19% in the first quarter, powered by deal activity in volatile markets, but the bank stock fell as investors worried about Wall Street's performance for the rest of the year. A surge in software stocks helped major U.S. stock indexes open the week with gains, with the S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Dow rising 1%, 1.2%, and 0.6% respectively. Trump's order to blockade Iranian trade through the Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's promise to continue to choke the strait are pushing global energy markets into ever deeper trouble. Meta Platforms this year is expected to surpass Alphabet's Google to become the world's leading digital advertising business, a first for the social media company. The Philippines ordered Meta to curb the spread of what it called false, panic-inducing content on its platforms, including claims about energy pricing and supply. Palo Alto Networks founder Nur Zuck agreed to buy California lender Liberty Bank and plans to use it to launch artificial intelligence tools for financial services. Oil field services provider Baker Hughes agreed to sell its Waygate Technologies business to Swedish industrial technology company Hexagon for around $1.45 billion in cash. Amazon continues to tackle one of the biggest retail markets in the U.S. with the expansion of its car sales business into new brands and more cities. Now for the key articles under the worldwide section. The U.S. imposed a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz after peace talks with Iran collapsed over the weekend, risking another shock to a global economy battered by war. Riyadh said Iran might retaliate against the blockade by closing a Red Sea choke point, crucial for Saudi Arabia's remaining oil exports. Trump's decision to post an AI-generated image depicting himself as a Christ-like figure and to criticize the Pope triggered significant pushback from his Christian supporters. A judge dismissed a Trump defamation lawsuit against the publisher of the Wall Street Journal for an article on Epstein, saying the president hadn't met the legal threshold for a judgment in his favor. Representatives Eric Swalwell of California and Tony Gonzalez of Texas said they would leave Congress in the wake of sexual misconduct allegations that sparked calls for them to quit or face expulsion votes. The suspect in an attack at Sam Altman's California home carried an anti-AI document that included a list of artificial intelligence CEOs. Prime Minister Carney of Canada secured a majority government after election wins, giving him a freer hand for his agenda aimed at rebuilding the economy. The rainbow pride flag can be displayed at New York City's Stonewall National Monument, the federal government said, reversing an earlier decision to remove it. DEI policies that encourage hiring managers on the basis of race undercut the industries that adopted them and the broader economy, a new White House study concludes. Crews were working to restore power to a closed hydroelectric station in northern Michigan as heavy rain threatened to cause a dam to overflow. Texas was investigating Lululemon for allegedly using so-called forever chemicals in its workout gear, a practice the company said it had discontinued years ago. The picture on today's front page shows President Trump standing outside the door of the Oval Office accepting a grocery delivery from a woman standing there. And that caption reads, "Say cheese." President Trump had McDonald's delivered to boast of his ban on taxing tips. While answering a question, he asked delivery driver Sharon Simmons if men should participate in women's sports. She demurred, saying she was only there about taxes. And that headline, "I'm here about no tax on tips." Articles from the front page follow. President's criticism of the Pope, religious image stun Christians. Online posts bring backlash from some in the base, sadness and frustration. Washington. President Trump's decision to post an AI-generated image depicting himself as a Christ-like figure and to fire off criticism of the Pope triggered the most significant pushback from his Catholic and evangelical Christian supporters since he returned to the White House. "We are a little bit beside ourselves," said John Yep, the CEO of Catholics for Catholics, a nonprofit that has hosted faith events at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club and maintains close ties to the administration. On Sunday night, Yep was eating dinner with friends after services when his phone lighted up with messages about the now deleted image in which Trump, wearing robes, touches the forehead of a man lying in a hospital bed. The collective sentiment around the table, Yep said in an interview, was one of sadness because we were truly confused by this president after Catholics gave him such a resounding vote, and yet he is treating our faith with such disrespect at this moment. He reached out to contacts close to the administration to voice his sadness and frustration. Ron Dreher, a conservative writer who attended the Catholic baptism of J.D. Vance before he entered politics and was elected Trump's vice president, went further. Not saying Trump is the Antichrist, Dreher told the Wall Street Journal, but he's radiating the spirit of Antichrist, no question. Douglas Wilson, co-founder of the conservative Calvinist denomination to which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth belongs, called the image blasphemous. The president's posting of the AI image comes after Trump lashed out at Pope Leo XIV following the pontiff's condemnation of the war in Iran, accusing the leader of the Catholic Church of being weak on crime and catering to liberals. Trump called the U.S.-born Pope a liberal and said he was not a big fan. In response, the Pope vowed to continue speaking out against war, saying on Monday, "I have no fear of the Trump administration." Conservative Christians have rallied behind Trump in recent years, despite initial misgivings, standing with him through 2 impeachments and 3 elections. Trump, in turn, has made good on campaign promises to them, nominating Supreme Court justices who helped overturn Roe versus Wade. But for many Christian leaders, Trump's Sunday night Truth Social post, along with the attack on the Pope, went too far. In the image, Trump is surrounded by glowing light with a woman clasping her hands in prayer. Bald eagles and jet fighters soar through the sky, and strange figures appear in the clouds overlooking the president. Trump confirmed he posted the religious image, but said he didn't intend to compare himself to Jesus. "It's supposed to be me as a doctor making people better," he said at the White House on Monday afternoon. The post had earlier been deleted from Truth Social. It wasn't the first time Trump, a Republican, has blended politics with religious imagery. Last year, Trump posted on Truth Social an AI-generated image of himself dressed as the Pope. The White House didn't explain why the post was deleted and broadly defended the president's record. The president has delivered unprecedented victories for Americans of faith, and he will continue to protect and expand our sacred right to religious freedom, White House spokeswoman Taylor Rogers said. The consternation over Trump's social media post could turn into a political liability for Republicans as the president leads the GOP into the midterm elections. He has won a majority of Catholic voters in 3 consecutive elections, most recently carrying 55% of Catholics in 2024, compared with former Vice President Kamala Harris's 43%, according to Pew Research Services. The Pope vowed to continue speaking out against war. The message of the gospel is very clear. "Blessed are the peacemakers," he said on board the papal plane flying to Algeria, where he was beginning a 4-nation African tour. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump's blockade on Iran in Strait begins. U.S. move threatens yet another blow to the global economy. Trump warns ships. By Shelby Holliday, Joseph D. Avila, and Elvin Kivelsim. The U.S. imposed a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz on Monday, after peace talks with Iran collapsed over the weekend, risking another shock to a global economy battered by weeks of war. President Trump warned that any Iranian fast attack ships that came near the blockade would be destroyed. Quote, "If any of these ships come anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated using the same system of kill that we use against the drug dealers on boats at sea. Trump wrote on social media on Monday. It is quick and brutal. The Trump administration has carried out a number of deadly military strikes on boats alleged to be carrying drugs while traveling in the Caribbean Sea and Pacific Ocean. Iran's armed forces said before the U.S. blockade began that such a move would constitute an illegal act of piracy. If the country's ports are threatened, no port in the Persian Gulf or the Sea of Oman will be safe. State broadcaster IRIB reported the armed forces as saying, "The Islamic Republic won't permit U.S. vessels to pass through the strait, and its military will protect the country's territorial waters," a spokesman for the Iranian armed forces said. The spokesman said, "The ports of the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman will be secure either for everyone or for no one." IRIB reported. Trump said the right people in Iran still want a deal after the weekend talks in Pakistan ended without an agreement. He went on to say Iran won't have a nuclear weapon, a key focus of talks. "We agreed to a lot of things, but we did not agree to that, but I think they will agree to it," Trump said. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan said full efforts were still being made to resolve the outstanding issues between the U.S. and Iran. Deals spur Goldman profit to increase 19% by Alexander Saidi. Goldman Sachs said its profits jumped 19% in the first quarter, powered by a resurgence in deal activity and volatile markets. But the bank's stocks fell 1.9% as investors worried the war in Iran would slow Wall Street's performance for the rest of the year. Chief Executive David Solomon said he expected companies would still push ahead on plans for deal making despite the war-related volatility. Solomon said that the executives he has spoken with believe they have an opportunity to drive scale and consolidation that wasn't possible under the Biden administration. Still, the uncertainty caused by the war could disrupt plans to buy and sell companies or take them public, and it already had quelled what was expected to be a boom in initial public offerings, Solomon said. Home builders forego frills for affordability by Nicholas G. Miller. Home builders are looking everywhere for ways to slash cost. They are finding them in cabinets, faucets, and even the garage door remote. Builders are opting for cheaper materials and rejiggering designs with cost saving top of mind. Particle board cabinets are in, hardware is out. Countertops are becoming thinner. Walls now feature smaller and fewer windows. An automatic garage opener is sometimes a frivolous luxury. The cumulative effect is changing the appearance of newly constructed U.S. homes. It kind of looks incomplete, said Erica Phelan, a real estate agent at Buyers Broker of Florida. She said the latest single-family homes lack the basics, such as cabinets with crown molding that used to be standard. The cost cutting is part of an effort to offer more affordable homes when buyers are concerned about high prices, elevated mortgage rates, and an uncertain economy. And then there's a graph showing housing sales fell in March. Home sales declined 3.6% in March to the lowest level since June 2025. Leaving the front page, Amazon's push into car sales is expanding, by Sean McLean. Now you can buy a brand new Corvette on Amazon.com. The e-commerce giant has quietly expanded its car sales business over the past year and a half. What started as an experiment with Hyundai Motor has grown in recent months to include vehicles from Kia, Mazda, Subaru, Chevrolet, and Jeep. The service, called Amazon Autos, is active in over 130 cities, including Los Angeles, Dallas, and New York, the company said. In expanding the program, Amazon is now tackling one of the biggest retail businesses in the U.S. and one of the last major purchases that is still difficult to make online: new cars. Around $1.3 trillion of cars were sold by dealerships in the U.S. last year, according to the National Automobile Dealers Association. The Amazon Autos program launched at the end of 2024. It allows customers to browse and purchase a car from nearby participating dealerships. The aim is to let customers complete much of the purchase and financing paperwork from home, cutting down on the amount of time spent in a physical store. Dealers pay a fee to have their cars listed on Amazon, but shoppers don't incur additional cost if they pull the trigger. Car buying is another traditional business at Amazon, whose recent expansions include healthcare, groceries, and big box retail, has the potential to disrupt. Yet Amazon says it doesn't plan to cut out dealerships, even if it could upend the traditional car buying process. For dealers, the benefit is getting their vehicles in front of buyers while they are scrolling through their phones on their couch. I think it's a really innovative product, said Matthew Phillips, who owns a Kia dealership in Glendale, California, that recently began listing new vehicles on Amazon. Amazon said it had signed up hundreds of dealers so far. While still early days, we are seeing a strong response from customers and dealers, and we continue to expand vehicle availability across the country, said Fan Jin, the director of Amazon Autos. Oil enters a new round of stress. Loss of Iranian crude is likely to intensify a global scramble as market fears rise. By Joe Wallace, Chelsea Delaney, and Costas Paris. President Trump's order to blockade Iranian trade through the Strait of Hormuz and Tehran's promise to continue to choke the strait are leaving global energy markets in even deeper trouble than they were just days ago. It isn't clear how ships can satisfy both U.S. and Iranian conditions on leaving the Gulf, shipbrokers and analysts said. Tehran says international ships need to pay to get through Hormuz, but Trump said he had instructed the Navy to interdict vessels that have paid a toll. Instead of the prospect of oil flowing again, as many hoped after the ceasefire was struck last week, the blockade stands to remove 2 million barrels of daily Iranian exports from a market already struggling to navigate a historic supply crunch. The loss of Iranian barrels is likely to intensify a worldwide scramble for crude. Iran's main customer, China, could join the competition for U.S. and European supplies unless it uses its reserves. 2 energy-laden ships sneaked through the strait before Monday's 10 a.m. Eastern Time start of the U.S. blockade. Tanker owners said they would hesitate before sending new vessels through. A Greek ship owner with several vessels waiting to enter to load oil for Chinese and Singaporean clients said he would wait. If the Hormuz threats don't stop in a few days, he said, he will call his ships back. An executive at COSCO Shipping said the Chinese company had 5 tankers that were set to go through Hormuz this week, but it has paused those voyages. The breakdown in peace talks and prospect of a fresh escalation in hostilities sent oil prices higher Monday. Front-month futures for Brent crude, the global benchmark, rose 6% Monday to $101 a barrel. Widely watched West Texas Intermediate was up about 1.5% to $98. However, the prices don't show the full extent of the stress. Traders say the world has worked through much of the buffer it had going into the Iran war, and warning signs are spreading through the oil market. Blockade puts another choke point at risk in the Red Sea. U.S. ships were on the move Sunday in the Persian Gulf near the Strait of Hormuz the day before the blockade began. By Summer Saeed and Jared Malzin. Saudi Arabia is pressing the U.S. to drop its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and return to the negotiating table, fearing President Trump's move to close it could lead Tehran to escalate and disrupt other important shipping routes, Arab officials said. The blockade is aimed at raising the pressure on Iran's crippled economy, but the officials said Saudi Arabia has warned Iran might retaliate by closing the Bab el-Mandeb, a Red Sea choke point crucial for the kingdom's remaining oil exports. The pushback is a sign of the risks and limitations of U.S. efforts to open the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran shut early in the war by attacking ships in the waterway, cutting off about 13 million barrels a day in oil exports, and sending future prices above $100 a barrel. The blockade of Iranian ports went into effect Monday after negotiations didn't persuade Iran to relax its hold on the strait. President Trump has been clear that he wants the Strait of Hormuz to be fully open to facilitate the free flow of energy. The administration is in frequent contact with our Gulf allies, who the president is helping by ensuring that Iran cannot extort the United States or any other country, White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly said. Saudi Arabia has been able to get its oil exports back up to their pre-war level of about 7 million barrels a day, despite the waterway blockage, by piping its crude across the desert to the Red Sea. Those supplies would be at risk if the Red Sea's exit route were closed as well. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the editorial page, Playing National Security Roulette. Lawmakers threaten to kill the crucial 702 intelligence program. Democrats want to block President Trump at every turn, but can they put the rancor aside to protect U.S. national security? That's the question as Congress debates whether to reauthorize Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA. In April 2024, the House narrowly passed a 2-year reauthorization of the surveillance authority that lets the government monitor foreigners abroad. The information is stored in a database that can be queried by U.S. spooks and often goes into the President's daily intelligence briefing. This should be easy when the U.S. is at war with Iran and China and Russia try to steal secrets with regularity. But 702 opponents say the ability to search for U.S. names in the database poses an intolerable threat to civil liberties. Warrants or bust. Representative Lauren Boebert, Republican from California, said recently, referring to the demand that intelligence agencies get a warrant every time they do a 702 search for a U.S. person. She's in league with Democrats like Representative Paloma Jayapal, Washington, and Senator Elizabeth Warren, who has called the program spying on American citizens without a warrant. Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, said recently he would expect warrant requirements and statutory penalties for privacy violations in exchange for reauthorizing 702. That's misguided. This isn't surveillance of Americans. It is surveillance of foreigners abroad. If the foreigners communicate with a U.S. person through a U.S. phone number or email address, that data is stored in a secure database. U.S. officials may, with justification, query the database, and a U.S. citizen's numbers may be pulled. The FBI's querying practices deserve an overhaul after agents ran searches on Black Lives Matter protesters, political donors, and members of Congress. But the intelligence community has since instituted safeguards on how searches must be authorized. In the 2024 Reforming Intelligence and Securing America Act, Congress required agents to get prior approval from a supervisor before running queries and prevented political appointees from signing off on them. An exception allows immediate searches that assist in mitigating or eliminating a threat to life or serious bodily harm. Sensitive queries, like those intended to target the media or elected officials and political appointees, require advance permission from the FBI's deputy director. The FBI must promptly notify congressional leadership of queries targeting a member of Congress. The bill also revoked the agency's ability to search the database for criminal matters not related to national security and required audits within 180 days of all U.S. person queries. The reforms appear to be working. An October 2025 report from the Justice Department Inspector General found that the FBI has implemented all of RISAA's querying reforms and that the number of non-compliant queries has been reduced substantially. That's an understatement. In 2023, the FBI ran more than 57,000 U.S. person queries. In 2025, it ran fewer than 8,000. The precision of the queries has also been strong. Between April 2024 and April 2025, the Justice Department National Security Division flagged 127 of 9,089 U.S. person queries as non-compliant. Of those, half were compliant, but flagged for procedural mistakes, like not including a written justification. Of the remaining 68 queries, 37 bad ones were from typos. Only 18 were flagged because the agent did not have a sufficient factual basis to believe that the queries were reasonably likely to retrieve foreign intelligence information. Justice calculated that was an overall compliance rate of 98.6% by the most conservative estimate. House Speaker Mike Johnson is seeking a clean 18-month reauthorization of the intelligence tool, and he'll need the saner voices of the political center to hold the line. Some moderate Democrats who supported FISA reauthorization in 2024 are wavering because they don't like the intelligence tool in the hands of the Trump administration or fear it could be used in an immigration context. House Judiciary Committee ranking Democrat Jamie Raskin, Democrat from Maryland, says he's shifting because a clean extension leaves the Trump administration in charge of policing its own abuses of this authority. He wrote in a letter to Democrats, and what could go wrong with that? So Mr. Raskin's partisanship trumps national security. He ignores the record since 2024. Under current law, queries are reported annually to Congress, so misuses of the program are identified. He also ignores that the most significant FISA abuse was the Barack Obama James Comey FBI use of Title I against the 2016 Trump campaign. Requiring a warrant can delay searches in cases where acting fast is crucial. It also passes responsibility to a judge when an administration official should be accountable. If Congress fails to reauthorize 702, the no voters will put the lives of Americans at risk. From the opinion pages, the curtain falls for Hungary's Orban. The longtime prime minister proved to be a better entertainer than he was a builder. By Walter Russell Mead. Hungarian politics don't usually matter much to the outside world, but the election victory of Peter Magbar's Tizza party is different. Vladimir Putin and Steve Bannon are plunged into gloom. Ursula von der Leyen and Volodymyr Zelensky have a spring in their step. As one of the most remarkable political careers of the 21st century comes to what looks like its end. Like him or loathe him, Viktor Orban was one of a handful of leaders who consistently punched above his weight. With a population of about 9.5 million and an underperforming economy, Hungary isn't one of the earth's movers and shakers. That Mr. Orban emerged from Budapest to become a hero to a generation of emerging mega activists in the U.S. and a significant player in European power politics testifies to the talent of the man Hungarian voters have just unceremoniously dumped. Even in defeat, Mr. Orban dominated headlines. Many newspapers featured his humiliating electoral catastrophe more prominently than Donald Trump's announcement of an American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and the outbreak of the noisiest, if not the most consequential, fight between an Anglophone leader and a Bishop of Rome since Pope Clement VII refused an annulment to King Henry VIII. Neither Mr. Orban's airtight American fans nor his cosmopolitan liberal critics ever really understood the longtime Hungarian prime minister. He was no Churchillian defender of Western Christian civilization against the barbarian hordes, nor was he a Putinesque autocrat building a permanent dictatorship that would keep him in power for life. A crusading defender of Western values would have been less eager to court Chinese support. An autocrat would have found ways to avoid or control an election that threatened his power. Mr. Orban was ultimately more impresario than statesman. There is always something theatrical about politics, especially in countries like Hungary, whose memories of a glorious but irrecoverable past dominate the public imagination. The rise of social media has intensified the hunger for stronger personal leadership, and the ability to project a personal brand and presence over the internet is an increasingly important aspect of political power all over the world. Like Mr. Trump, Mr. Orban understood the importance of polarization. Fame, as Samuel Johnson put it, is a shuttlecock. If it be struck only at one end of the room, it will soon fall to the ground. Both inside Hungary and on the broader world stage, the Prime Minister created a compelling set of polarizing narratives that kept both ends of the room engaged. Liberals couldn't stop hating and reviling him. Populist and nationalist conservatives hailed him as a deliverer. To succeed at this business, one must be both a troll and a panderer. As a troll, one goads ideological opponents into frenzies of deranged hostility. As a panderer, one artfully strokes purring sympathizers. Hate you or love you, the audience keeps coming back for more. Struck repeatedly and energetically at both ends of the room, the shuttlecock flies high. Migration, Christianity, homosexuality, cosmopolitan liberalism, national sovereignty, and Russia. Viktor Orban knew where the hot buttons were, and he pressed them often and hard. Nationalist conservatives calved, were happy. Global liberals raged. Meanwhile, he attended to the construction of a political machine aimed less at changing the world than at maintaining his power. Like the late Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley, Mr. Orban organized Hungarian life so that local politicians and businesses needed his support to succeed. Internationally, he ensured the attention of sympathetic observers by hosting and supporting prominent voices on the emerging nationalist right. Excluded from the conventional circuit of ego-boosting conferences and fellowships that give approved A- and B- list public intellectuals validation and entitlement. Off-right intellectuals flocked to Budapest to bask in the esteem of their peers. For most of the past 16 years, the Orban system worked. The causes with which he was identified resonated with an aging, shrinking Hungarian population worried about the future and feeling threatened by migration and cultural change. At the same time, his opposition to the cosmopolitan, post-national, and post-historical liberal ideology of the European Union gave him followers around the world, which helped solidify his position at home. But Mr. Orban was a better entertainer than builder. His widely praised pro-family policy initiatives failed to reverse the decline in Hungary's population. Talented young Hungarians continue to immigrate to Western Europe. The economy stagnated as corruption ballooned. Hungarians were once among the wealthiest inhabitants of the former Warsaw Pact nations. Today, they are poorer than Romanians. Gerrymandering and media manipulation couldn't overcome increasing public weariness with a leadership that seemed bereft of ideas. Faced with an opponent who skillfully minimized his ideological distance from Mr. Orban while focusing on competence and honesty, Hungary's Prime Minister went down to a historic defeat. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For now, at least, the Iran war seems to be failing. If you're winning, you don't typically threaten to destroy a civilization or look for scapegoats. By Gerard Baker. It's still too soon for a verdict on President Trump's excursion in the Middle East. The failure of negotiations in Pakistan to end the war with Iran presumably presages an escalation of kinetic operations, and on Sunday, Mr. Trump announced a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which suggests a new level of risk. We must continue to pray for our success and the safety of our troops, but it isn't too soon to offer a tentative judgment on the president's biggest foreign policy action to date: ill-conceived, ill-planned, ill-executed, and so far failing. For those who dispute this and prefer to buy the administration's protestations of victory, I'd suggest you listen not to the words of the president's critics, but to his own voice and those of his supporters. There are some things you don't typically say when you have won or are winning a war. You don't typically threaten to wipe out the other side's civilization, not only because mass slaughter is a war crime and something the U.S. has generally shunned. You don't threaten such villainy if you don't need to. You make that kind of desperate, deranged threat only if things aren't going your way. Winning doesn't typically require a scapegoat, let alone a herd of scapegoats grazing in the hyperbolic pastures of presidential rhetoric. Only losers look for people and things to blame. So blaming the Europeans, the same Europeans you said 2 weeks ago weren't fit for combat, the same Europeans whose governments you are committed to help replace with parties that will reverse the continent's civilizational erasure. How'd that work out in Hungary, Mr. Vice President? Blaming these Europeans for failing to help finish a war you started without consulting them is a sign that you aren't winning. Telling reporters that Benjamin Netanyahu was responsible for making farcical bullsh claims about how easy regime change would be is also firmly in the category of scapegoating when things don't go as planned. Neither do you leak to the New York Times that you always had doubts about the war. Here we can let the president off the hook. Someone told the paper that J.D. Vance was a war skeptic all along. Keen observers of Mr. Vance's infinitely flexible political loyalties will note with interest that according to the Times story, he managed to argue in the space of a week or two for no war, for a limited war, and for an all-out war. But these words and leaks are mere symptoms of a failing enterprise. The underlying conditions point the same way. There's a common view among critics of the war that the U.S. has achieved military success, but has had a political and strategic failure. But I'm not even sure that's correct if you measure performance against the principal goals of the operation. Eliminating the nuclear threat was the most important military objective of the war, as Mr. Trump made clear in his speech on the opening night of hostilities, and as he continues to emphasize. Mr. Vance has just spent 21 hours in Islamabad trying to get Iran to end a nuclear program that we just spent 38 days apparently bombing out of existence and turning to dust. This was the same nuclear program we were told had been obliterated 10 months ago in Operation Midnight Hammer, all of which suggests a remarkable Lazarus-like quality to Tehran's nukes that ought to have us even more alarmed. It's true, we have degraded Iran's missile and wider conventional capabilities, but it's unclear by how much or how much it matters. Iran was still firing missiles and drones as late as the day the ceasefire went into effect last week. There must be serious doubt about how much lawn mowing we can do as the mullahs regrow the grass of their conventional weapons capabilities. The failure to take out the regime is the key to all this, and this was always a long shot without a full-scale invasion. It seems the administration mistook leadership for regime and somehow convinced itself that replacing one religious zealot with another would improve the policy outcome. These military shortfalls are in addition to the strategic and economic nightmare the war has created in the Strait, the damage it has done to our alliances, the harm it has done to our relationship with Israel, the gift it has given our greatest strategic adversary, China. Perhaps most damaging of all, the demonstration it has offered to the world that however great our military, however technologically superior, without deft leadership and achievable strategy, we are proving ourselves unable again to vanquish a country with an economy roughly half the size of Belgium's. The good news again is that it's too soon to declare a final victory. When this war started, I expressed cautious optimism that it would be successful. That was insufficient caution, as it turned out. The problem with wars is that when they don't go as you planned, you have an ugly choice: end them unsatisfactorily or wade in deeper. Nothing we have seen so far can give confidence that wading deeper now ends in a quick victory. Letters to the editor: blockading Iran's ports is the right policy. Jonathan Panikoff rightly says that leaving Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz would mean the war was a strategic failure. Even before the truce, Iran had been letting ships transit the strait to deliver oil to its friends, but not to ours. And presumably, it had been allowing inbound shipping headed to Iran. Now that talks have broken off, the U.S. has declared and should keep in place a blockade, refusing to allow shipping to or from Iran until Iran agrees to free, unmonitored transit of the strait for all. There might have to be some exceptions for inbound civilian goods. The strait should be open to all or none, not just to friends of Iran. America's blocking the strait will cause short-run pain for the West in the form of temporarily higher oil prices, but no boots on the ground, no destruction of infrastructure, no civilian casualties, and no major depletion of weapons stockpiles. It will cut off revenue to Iran and oil to friends of Iran. We are exchanging short-term pain for long-term gain. From S. Paul Posner. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the April 14th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Corrine. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day or evening.